This week's episode of Discovering Trek is brought to you exclusively by Fansets. Discover a whole new universe of pin collectibles with Fansets online at fansets.com. Fansets. We are Star Trek.
Harry Mudd, and, well, Harry Mudd. The Escape Artist, the fourth and final episode of Short Treks, has come and gone and gave us a worthy send-off to these short Star Trek stories. Rainn Wilson showed us in Discovery Season 1 that he could play the legendary Harcourt Fenton Mudd with brilliance and pizzazz, and with an entire story focusing in on this dastardly character, could we actually be wishing for more Mudd at this point? Well, let's find out. My name is Dan Davidson, and we are Discovering Trek. Welcome one and all to Discovering Trek, the Star Trek Discovery Companion, presented by Fansets. The Escape Artist wrapped up our 4 mini-episode jaunt in the Star Trek universe, and I, for one, loved this send-off. Mixing a great story with superb acting and directing by Rainn Wilson, plus an added bonus of lots of humor, something that we don't see a lot of in Star Trek. And this host was as happy as a bunch of identical androids stuck together in a holding cell. As always, this is the premier podcast to get the most in-depth discussion and analysis about our favorite spore-jumping starship and her crew. And whether it's a full episode or a 15-minute short trek, we are here to break it all down, give you our opinions, and look ahead to what we think might happen next. And as always, when I say we, well, it's time to introduce my irreplaceable co-host. Oh, how I wish I could find some planet to build countless android replicas of him. I just sit back and drink jippers on a beach while he did all the work. But I guess it's not meant to be. After all, I find the one quite adequate. Little Who Mourns for Adonais quote there for you. He's my very special friend. He's my brother in Trek. He is the one, and he is the only Bill Smith. Bill, I guess you could say that this week, when it rains, it pours.
Ouch. Yeah. Hey, buddy. So good to be here. Thank you very much. And I just want to say, jippers on a beach. Jippers on a beach. Jippers on a beach. Jippers on a beach. I've had that phrase stuck in my head for days. So if I have anything to thank Mike McMahon for, it's that, I suppose. But I think we probably have a lot more to talk about than that. Plus, I want to know what a jipper is.
I haven't the slightest idea, but I'll try it if I can have it on the beach.
Yes, I second. But no, great to be here. Looking forward to the Escape Artist, and hopefully we'll look at Short Treks as a whole.
Absolutely, it is great to be back as always, sitting here chatting Discovery with you, man. It's also great to hear from our listeners. So how might they contact us so that they can give us their thoughts about Harry Mudd and the Escape Artist?
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
Dan, hailing frequencies are open and we're transmitting messages in all languages, on all frequencies, and, maybe even we'll get a bounty hunter to sell us to somebody else for jippers on a beach. Jippers on a beach. You can discover us on Twitter at Discovering Trek, and on the Book of Faces, we can be found at facebook.com/Discovering Trek. In either place, you can join in on the discussion, leave us comments, questions, suggestions, or maybe even your recipes for your favorite beachside potent potables. Plus, don't forget that you can also send us a voicemail by going to trekgeeks.com and clicking on the big blue button on the right-hand side of the website. Please do remember, though, that any comments you leave us may be used in an upcoming episode of Discovering Trek. Dan.
Okay, so the Escape Artist. Let's get your general thoughts, man. I, for one, just awesome. I loved this episode. It was funny. It was witty. It was so enjoyable. And while the Brightest Star is by far and away the best of the short treks, in my opinion, I think that this is a close second. I love the continuity aspects of this episode and how they tied things together. And as strange as this may sound, it actually left me wanting to see more Harry Mudd. And I got to say, I never thought I would hear myself say that in my lifetime.
I agree with you 100%. On Trek Geeks, I've said before that I am by no means a fan of Harry Mudd. In fact, I hate Harry Mudd episodes, but I have to give Rainn Wilson and Discovery a bunch of credit for actually making me enjoy the character now. Mm-hmm. I actually went back and watched all of the Mud episodes from TOS and the animated series, all 3 of them. And I actually enjoy them a little more now because I think that Rainn Wilson's performance informs this later version of Harry Mudd in a retconish kind of way. I think it's really helped me appreciate Roger Carmel quite more. General thoughts, I thought this was so much fun. I wasn't sure what to make of it at first, I'll be honest. But then I got to the end of it and I was just like, wow. Mike McMahon, the writer, also is going to be the creative force behind Star Trek Lower Decks, the animated series.
Correct.
Just really understood where this character was coming from, and Rainn Wilson just really, he's Rainn Wilson. He's great in everything. I'm a big Dwight Schrute fan from The Office. I have a Dwight Schrute bobblehead, and I can't wait to hopefully maybe have a Harry Mudd bobblehead someday.
Hopefully they are. And hear that, CBS? Let's get started on that merchandise.
Let's do it.
Black alert. Black alert.
From here on in, this episode of Discovering Trek contains spoilers. So if you haven't watched Short Trek's The Escape Artist, unshackle yourself, grab your favorite cudgel, head on over to CBS All Access to check it out, and then come back on here to Discovering Trek for some great Short Treks discussion.
So we find our friend Harry Mudd in a familiar position, in trouble. He winds up being sold to a Tellarite merchant who wants revenge. Apparently, Mudd slept with his sister and stole his cudgel, whatever a cudgel is. Can't wait to find out about that. And in the process of Mudd trying to beg and plead for his freedom, we see shades of Mudd's dealings before. All kinds of interesting situations. Well, fast forward, the Tellarite decides he's going to leave Mudd with Starfleet. They meet up with Starfleet. Starfleet says, oh, yeah, great. Another Harry Mudd. Turns out Harry's an android. The Tellarite's none too pleased. He rips off Harry's arm, or faux Harry's arm, and winds up being introduced to a whole room full of Harry Mudds, which I have to believe is the definition of hell in many worlds, in many species. And then we go on our way, the real Harry we see on a ship, making more faux Harrys, drinking a jipper. Again, whatever a jipper is, I really want to know because I'd like to try it. And heading to where no con man has gone before, Dan.
Another 5-star performance, my friend.
Now imagine if there were, all off the cuff, if there were multiple versions of me, it could have been like a 1 million-star performance. You never know.
That would have been horrible. But I appreciate the effort. It was great. Excellent. All right, so let's get right to it. Let's get to the breakdowns. Let's get to our likes and dislikes because this is always a fun part of the show. I'm going to start off by saying my number one like for The Escape Artist was, and how could it not be, Rainn freaking Wilson. I got to be honest. I've told you this before, Bill. Before Discovery Season 1, I have never watched anything with Rainn Wilson in it. Not a single thing. I loved this portrayal of Mudd in the first 2 episodes that we saw in Season 1. And several weeks ago, I actually watched the first episode of The Office based on your recommendation. And I love his character. He's so me and he's so you, kind of wrapped up together a little bit. So this short trek really let us see Rainn in all his comedic glory, while at the same time taking the Harry Mudd lore that we already know about and just adding to it. And I thought it was fantastic.
He's also my first, real like of the episode. Rainn Wilson is great in everything he's in. I mean, when we were at STLV this past summer, there were people cosplaying as the Thermians from Galaxy Quest, which is Rainn Wilson's first real movie role. Mm-hmm. And he just thought that was the best. He stopped, he took a photo with him, he posted it on his own social media. He leaves an imprint on just about everything he does, whether it's 6 Feet Under on HBO or The Office or whatever it is. And in this case, he clearly puts his own stamp on Harry Mudd in a beautiful way and brings a level of scoundrelousness to this character that really it's been lacking since Mudd's Women. You figure in TOS, Harry Mudd is not a nice guy. He's a very unsavory character who's essentially selling women into arranged marriages with minors and other lonely type people all over the galaxy using a special drug. So, he takes that and builds a bridge to the mud that we met in TOS and does it in a really entertaining and interesting fashion. So when you also consider that he directed the episode, he really just has a lights out performance, on either side of the camera in this episode, without a doubt.
I have to actually go back and correct myself because I completely forgot that Rainn Wilson was in Galaxy Quest.
Yeah,
and I have seen that one several times. I think that's the only thing of Rainn's that I've seen. I got to say hi to him very quickly at the Discovery premiere out in Hollywood a couple years ago. He was a lot of fun to be there. He was joking around the whole time, and he seems to have a lot of fun with the fans, as you mentioned, STLV and stuff like that. So he seems to be the type of person who appreciates what he's giving to Trek. And we certainly appreciate what he has given to us as fans. So I love what he's been doing. And like I said, I hope we see him again. I'd love to see him direct an episode based on what we saw in his directing in this. So we'll see what happens. My second like Bill is kind of an interesting one for me. And that's the Tellarite that was in this episode. I was really intrigued in how the Tellarites were portrayed and how they looked in Discovery Season 1. They were more feral looking. They were more imposing than what we're used to seeing. But as with most episodes that we've ever seen Tellarites in, they really don't do much. They just stand around. I mean, the one that pops into my head, of course, is the TOS episode with Spock's father and so on. And we didn't really see them do much until this episode. I really love the bounty hunter captain. And what I really liked about him was whenever he talked, and my wife loved this as well, he'd always grunt afterward like a pig. And I thought it was just another one of those funny moments of the episode that made it really work. And it was a highlight for me. And based on what we saw with this one Tellarite, I really hope we get to see more of them going forward.
I have to agree with you. I've never been a huge Tellarite guy. I know that our friend Larry Nemechek is a Tellarite apologist for all intents and purposes, loves Tellarites with every fiber of his being. I like where the Tellarites are because, like you said, in TOS, Journey to Babel, I don't take them very seriously. In fact, I took them about as seriously as I took the Ferengi in Next Gen.
Wow.
I know, but in Discovery, I think we've kind of taken a look that is even better than the one on Enterprise, and we've made them a little more fearsome. We've made them a little more dangerous looking, and I think that really brings an interesting quality to the Tellarites, especially this particular one. So yeah, that one absolutely works for me. My second like of the episode has to be Mike McMahon. I mean, he turns in a solid script here. Like I said, at first I wasn't exactly sure how to feel about it. And then upon successive rewatches, I decided, he really understands who Harry Mudd is. This gives me great hope for Star Trek Lower Decks, something that I was not excited about when it was announced.
Right.
I have a feeling that since I get the sense he understands the tone and the character building of Star Trek, I have a feeling that he's probably the perfect person to take this project on. So I'm looking forward to that. I really like what he did here in this short. And I mean, I hope he gets to contribute to a full length episode at some point, whether a story idea or an actual script. I think that would be really interesting because I have a feeling he'd take us in a different direction. And I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about since the beginning of Discovery is the amazing writers' room and what they've contributed to the show, no matter who it is. And this one certainly stands out as I think one of the things I like the most about this is it's one of the more memorable written episodes. You don't expect the things that we see in this episode when you're watching Star Trek, and I think that was definitely a bonus. My third like in this is a little confusing because I'm not sure if I'm correct, but when has that ever stopped me before? So I'll just
never
go ahead and give it to you. Yeah. I'm going to say the homage to TOS in this episode. When we first realized that Mudd was an android and there were a lot of them, I audibly whooped in my living room because it made me think instantly about the androids and Mudd. Now, I'm not exactly sure where this falls in the line, but it makes me think that it's trying to tie it together a little bit with the androids and with Norman that we're going to see later on. I know that Mudd talked about in that episode how he crash landed on the planet with the androids, but I still do like, and I couldn't help but think that this was all somehow tied together. But the thing that really stood out to me, and it's just a small thing, but I'm sure it's everything, it's the one thing that every Star Trek fan jumped on and loved, is that one of the duplicate Mudds was actually wearing the blue jacket with those gold epaulets that we see Mudd wear in TOS. And I was just smiling from ear to ear. And for me, this was just a great example of what the writers have been promising us. They have a plan, they stick to the plan, and they explain things that people have been asking questions about since Discovery started. This attention to detail is what I love about the writers in Star Trek Discovery, and I thought it was brilliant, and I thought it was perfectly executed in that specific scene.
Absolutely. I'm going to dovetail on that with my third like of the episode, which is humor. You know, one of the things that Star Trek has always done really well is inserting humorous aspects or even entire humorous episodes to break up the drama of a given season. TOS did it really well. Next Gen, all the other series had their forays into humor, and this Short Treks is no exception. You know, it's interesting because we have a very serious situation here, in that Harry Mudd has been captured, but the circumstances around it kind of make you laugh. You know, here's Harry. He's always figured a way out of it. I mean, thus the title, The Escape Artist. And all you can do is sit back and just appreciate the lengths he went to. Whenever we see Harry Mudd, he's always dealing with some kind of new technology or new advance, whether it's the Venus drug or whether it's the planet of androids or whether it's a time-shifting bracelet, you know, that causes you to back up in time and magic to make the sanest man go mad. And this is really no exception. He's got a fleet of Harrys. Let's just be honest about that. And I like the fact that we have to question where this takes place in the timeline. You know, some of the charges they read off, we don't hear again in TOS, but, you know, it could happen before, it could happen after, based on, you know, all the androids. And like you said, the jacket with the gold epaulets, you know, or if it does happen before TOS, maybe he gets his record expunged for something that happens in between now and then in the next 9 years. We don't know. So there's plenty to scratch our heads over. There's plenty that, you know, we can fill in the details in our own minds and still be 100% true to canon, which is the thing I like about this episode.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned a moment ago the way that Trek has been able to do humor well. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode how it's not seen, in my opinion, enough, but I do agree. When it's done right. This may be one of the best examples of comedic Trek, at least that I can think of. I mean, there's always great ones. There's a piece of the action. There's all kinds of good ones that we can talk about. But this one really, it made me laugh out loud, which is something that I don't recall doing when I've seen some of the comedic episodes for the first time. And a perfect example is when Harry had his flashbacks, how he would use the exact same dialogue no matter what situation he was in. It made me laugh out loud. I thought it was great.
Well, you know, at the end of the day, Star Trek is, you know, a dramatic series. We're not talking about the Orville here. You know, this is not designed to make light of Star Trek. Life has funny moments, and so does Star Trek. And I'm glad that they embraced it the way they did. And honestly, I don't think this episode works nearly as well with anyone other than Rainn Wilson as Harry Mudd. I just think he's able to balance that line so expertly. With some of the other projects he's worked on in his career, he nails this from start to finish. It's the perfect homage to Roger Carmel, and it's the perfect performance as somebody carrying on this role as his very own. It's so outstanding what he does, and I don't think that he's getting quite enough credit for it.
We'll give him all the credit he needs, that's for sure. So we have I was going to say 6, but we have 5 likes because we both picked Rainn as our number 1 like. So lots of likes. I really don't think we're going to have too many things to discuss in terms of dislikes. I really had to sit back and scratch my head for a few minutes to think of one. And one that I came up with, in all honesty, is this episode was so enjoyable and so much fun and made me wanting more Mudd that I think it was too short. This is the first of the short treks that I wish was longer because I wanted to see more Harry Mudd. You know, there was the first short trek that I thought would have been perfect This is the first short trek that I think they could have added 30 minutes to and made it a complete episode. While the Brightest Star was the best of the short treks, in my opinion, I think that the episode was at the right length to tell that important story of Saru. This one was a fun, exciting episode that I wish could have been longer. And I think that goes towards crediting, like we've been talking about, Rain for what he did in it.
Agreed. I think that the length is probably one of my dislikes too. I agree with you. It could have been longer. The Brightest Star didn't need to be longer. It told a concise story in the time frame that it had. And although they could have added more to it, they didn't need to. It was such a perfect exposition to the day Saru decided that there was more to life. The escape artist does so well what Runaway had hoped to do. Tilly is a fantastic character. Mary Wiseman is a wonderful actress, and they did their best to try to insert some levity using that episode, but I don't think it worked a tenth as well as this one did. And I think part of that is having people who understand Trek and know how to write characters the way that Mike McMahon does. Could they have added 30 minutes to this? Yes. Would it have been entertaining? Absolutely. I don't think that script would have suffered at all. Could this episode have been longer? Absolutely. Yeah. Do I think it suffered as a result? No.
Right.
But when you start to see more Harry Mudd like this, you want more Harry Mudd.
Right. Yeah. It's a dislike, not so much that it suffered because it was short. It's a dislike because we want more. So what else did you have for dislikes? I really didn't have anything else that I could think of for the past couple of days. I've been trying to think of things that I might be like, okay, I didn't like this. I guess if I was going to choose anything else, I touched upon it briefly, is where is this in the timeline? With the androids and the androids on the crash planet, does it all tie together somehow? That's kind of a question mark. It's not a big issue for me, but it is something that it's in my mind.
I'll agree with you there. I think I'd like to know a little more specifically where this is in the timeline. Other than that, I think my only other dislike would have to be that I wish there was a Harry Mudd series, because I would watch the hell out of it. I really would, because I think that this adds the scoundrelousness that I talked about earlier that we wish Harry Mudd had in Mudd's Women. I'm sorry, in I, Mudd.
I, Mudd. Yep.
And also in the animated series episode, which is essentially a ripoff of Mudd's Women in a way. So I wish they had greenlit, like maybe a Harry Mudd miniseries, maybe a shorter run series, or maybe even a full length Harry Mudd series, because I would find that incredibly entertaining with what Rainn Wilson is doing. Other than that, there really isn't much to dislike about this episode. I think they ended super strong with this one, to put us in the right frame of mind for Discovery coming back in 2 weeks' time when this aired.
It's funny how one person, all it takes is one man with a vision. I'd never in 1,000 years would have thought of wanting to see more Harry Mudd or know more about the character. But Rainn's portrayal of this guy, just like you said, it's changed everything. It's changed the whole scope, and we want to see more about what he does and what he's been through. I think it's fantastic. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Were you surprised when at the end of the episode when what looked like a female character took off the mask and it was Harry?
Only slightly, because I didn't really pay enough attention to that character the first time. I figured it was secondary to what was going on in the scene, and I was wrong. I got faked out.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes the whole thing even more fun to me to go back and watch and go, oh yeah, I guess that is Harry Mudd. I didn't even think about it.
I sounded kind of stupid when it was happening, because she was sitting in the chair and starts taking her mask off. And I looked at my wife and I said, I wonder if that's Stella, which makes absolutely no sense at all. But
no, I thought the same thing.
Oh, okay, good. So we're both wrong. It did surprise me. And then I just started laughing again, because it just shows that he's been making tons of profit off of this whole scam, because he's the man behind the mask. I thought it was a great, great little twist at the end.
Well, I guess I want to know what happened to Stella too, since we last saw her on Discovery. When she and her dad were taking Harry back to a life of upright uprightedness, if you will, is leaving behind his criminal ways and shaking off those shackles, which apparently works so well. But I would have liked to have learned maybe a little snippet of where she was at the time, because why would she keep wanting that guy around? I got to know.
That could tie into the whole "when did this episode take place" thing.
Very true.
Yeah, I guess maybe someday we'll find out.
Dan, as we finish up Short Treks, we are just days away from the season 2 premiere of Discovery, and our friends at Fansets are really busy preparing some pretty special pins for season 2, aren't they?
Absolutely, they are, man. We loved the episodic pins from season 1, and we are proud to announce here on Discovering Trek to the entire world that season 2 will once again bring special episodic pins to all of you collectors. As with last season, there's going to be a special pin for each episode of season 2 with the episode number and title and a special image from the episode. But unlike last season, these pins will be available to purchase on an individual basis instead of as a whole set, and the prices for these pins will remain the same as last year's. $20 for the first and last episodes of the season because they're larger, and $15 for all episodes in between.
Oh, that is such fantastic news, Dan. Now, keep in mind, friends, that these pins will be limited to only 200 pins per episode. So don't delay in getting yours while they last. Dan and I have actually seen the first couple of pins, and believe me, you will not want to miss adding these to your collection. Look for the first episodic pins to be available in the coming days over at fansets.com. Fansets is pinpoint accuracy. And as always, we thank our friends at Fansets for being our exclusive sponsor of Discovering Trek.
Okay, buddy. So Short Treks has ended, at least for now, that we know of. 4 episodes, 4 varying levels of what we liked and what we disliked. So let's talk about that for a few minutes, kind of taking the whole thing into consideration instead of just the escape artists this week. So let me ask you, did Short Treks work for you?
You mean in general?
Yeah, in general, was this something that was that you can give your thumbs up to and you'd like to see again, possibly?
Okay.
Or is it something that, I understand they were trying to fill in before season 2 started, but it wasn't what I expected. What did you think?
I think that in my mind, Short Treks was supposed to be something that sort of, appeased us until we got to season 2 of Discovery. It was starting later in the year than season 1 did. Season 1 started in September, and this one is starting in January. So I feel like it was designed to sort of bridge that gap of what people expected, because by this point, Trek will have been off the air for 10 months unless they do this. So I think that in that regard, sort of an amuse-bouche in a way, I think it works. I don't think the concept worked nearly as well at first, and I'm going to talk about that a little later on. But I think that it finished incredibly strong. I was hoping from Short Treks that these would be more explorations of characters that we knew and providing more backstory, kind of like the last 2 did. Because there are so many characters on Discovery we know nothing about. The bridge crew, for example. Right. I mean, you got
Detmer.
Start with Detmer. I want to know about that eye implant. I want to know how this bridge crew came to be the bridge crew, how they came together, how they were selected. Maybe their time before Discovery, maybe there's something they went through with the Academy. Who knows? But I wanted it to sort of paint on that canvas. The Saru episode, I think, did that perfectly. This episode, I think, provides that detailed hairy mud that is super interesting. And I think that worked really well. Whereas I think with the first 2 episodes, I don't think it was nearly as successful in doing that. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying, yeah, I think as a concept, I think it worked. And I think that if they go forward with it, which is something I would enjoy, I think it should be more like the second 2 episodes than the first.
Right. I agree with you. And you took some of the words right out of my mouth. I expected, we saw the announcement last year that they want more Trek, and more Trek was coming. And I think this was the first real more Trek that we have seen since Discovery started. And I was very much looking forward to it. And I was very disappointed, to be honest, after the first 2 episodes. I felt that at that time, it was just being used as filler. and there wasn't really a lot of attention being given to it. Now, like you said, the episodes, Runaway had some great Mary Wiseman points to it. We both were kind of meh, to use one of your phrases from Trek Geeks on it. I totally did not like Calypso. I thought it was very disappointing. But then episodes 3 and 4 of Short Treks took place and really changed my mind. It's kind of what we've talked about before with previous seasons of Star Trek. The first season, or maybe the first 2 seasons, kind of take a while for things to get going, and it really starts taking off after that. I think Short Treks can be the exact same thing in a condensed version. The first 2 episodes, 3 and 4, right off the charts and how great they were. So if they decide to continue this in the future, I think it can be very successful if they build upon what they've built upon so far. I think it can be very successful. If it's going to be kind of a going back and starting from scratch again, I'm a little concerned. Another long-winded answer like yours. I think it worked as a concept based on what we saw for the wrap-up of the last 2 episodes. And the last 2 episodes really saved the entire idea of Short Treks, and for me, made it a successful in-between season filling of Star Trek.
It's the kind of thing where I would like to see on a regular basis. Obviously we have the Picard series coming later, and theoretically in 2019, assuming no delays. I'd love to see more Short Treks this summer, maybe after the Discovery season finishes. They've talked about wanting to keep Star Trek on CBS All Access year-round at some point, or new Star Trek in any event. I think maybe turning Short Treks into its own little anthology series within Star Trek, I think, is a fabulous idea. Let's give it its own budget. Let's turn this into a thing, because I think there's so much to mine from these episodes, provided they're done well.
One of the things that I was looking forward to seeing with Short Treks, and I think we still have a chance of seeing it, is I'm like, okay, when we heard what they were doing and the titles of the episodes and who they were focusing on, I'm like, oh, this is going to give us an idea of maybe something we're going to see in season 2. Runaway, possibly. We don't know. Calypso, absolutely not. I don't think there's any chance that we see anything related to that in season 2. I know for a fact, based on what we've seen in the trailer, that the Brightest Star has a tie to season 2. And I really hope that something with Harry Mudd comes along again during the season. So it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing if that hope comes true. We'll see what happens.
I'm of the mindset where I think the only one we're going to see some continuation of is the Brightest Star, like you said, because we know that for a fact. I don't think we're going to see it with Runaway. I don't think we're going to see it. I know we're not going to see it with Calypso, and I really don't think we'll see it with Escape Artist, although it would be nice. Don't get me wrong. Right. But I think that the only one that for sure that we know we're going to have something mined from is the Brightest Star, and I think that's obvious. I think it's the perfect one to choose from, quite frankly.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about whether we thought it worked, which I think we both agree that it did after seeing the last 2 episodes. Let's stack them up like a nice little sandwich for that Jipper on the Beach, man. Let's talk about what your favorite was all the way down to your least favorite, or in reverse order, whichever you want. How would you rank these 4 Short Treks? I think I know the answer, but I'm sure our listeners want to hear it.
I'm gonna start in reverse order. Because we've talked a lot about, the 2 best ones. In the number 4 slot, coming in at the bottom, is Calypso for me. It's like you said so very well in the episode we did on Calypso. This could have been done on any science fiction show on any ship. It could have been Battlestar Galactica or Firefly or, Buck Rogers in the 25th century, because there was nothing that made this specifically Star Trek. I get that Michael Chabon wanted to do it without the typical trappings of Star Trek, but unfortunately it appears that meant without any Star Trek whatsoever. I can only hope that he has more focus on Star Trek in the Picard series, which he is also attached to write for. And with Sir Patrick on board, I think that'll be the case. But I think it definitely was the weakest of all the performers, despite telling an entertaining story. And number 3 is Runaway. I get what they were trying to do with Runaway, and I think that Runaway was just slightly better than Calypso. Mary Wiseman really was the best part about it. I thought the writing of that was just confusing and confused, which I think are 2 different things. And it really didn't work for me. I thought it was a poor first one to start with. And then there's a wide gap between number 3 and number 2, because I think there's a real separation. At number 2, I do have the Escape Artist, because I think it is head and shoulders above Runaway by so many lengths, man. It's what Runaway could have been if it had been written a tenth as well. And then, of course, the best one in my mind has to be The Brightest Star, this Saru story written by Bo Yeon Kim and Erica Lippold, and directed so well by Doug Arniakowski. It was what you want in a backstory. It was what you want in an introductory piece, and some exposition. I thought it was so well done that it not only gave me more about Saru, but it really informed me as to where he is today, right now. So I don't think they get much better than that. And here's hoping that they take the success of the last two and springboard off it. What about you?
Well, it's going to be kind of boring, but my list is exactly the same as yours. Calypso comes in at the bottom. Of course, we talked about it at length. You're absolutely right. Like I said on that episode, this could have taken place on any science fiction television show. The only thing that was Star Trek about this is that it took place on Discovery, and that's not important enough for me to give it something that I really appreciated. And unfortunately, I don't really have anything good to say about this episode. It was a huge disappointment for me. So it came in at number 4. Number 3 was Runaway. I thought Mary Wiseman did a great job with what she was given, and that's the key to why this episode wasn't as great as it could have been. She wasn't given enough to really let her character shine. There were far too many plot holes and story holes in this episode. And that unfortunately made it suffer. It was an unbelievably strong episode with the two women being involved in it and having a great dialogue and what was going on. But unfortunately, the lack of solid writing is what made that episode for me suffer. So that came in at number 3. As with you, Escape Artist was my second favorite. It was a brilliant story. It was brilliantly acted, brilliantly directed, and it made me want more Harry Mudd. And if anybody can ever do anything to make anyone say, I want more Harry Mudd, that has to be a story that's at the top of your list. So very good with that one. And like you, number 1 by far and away for me was The Brightest Star. This is exactly the story that I had been hoping for from Bowie and Erica. They did not disappoint in the slightest. It was a phenomenal Saru story. It was one of my favorite, if not my favorite character on Star Trek Discovery. It was brilliantly done by Doug Jones, as every second of screen time that he has, he always shines on. This was, for me, the truest Star Trek story. His quote at the end of the episode, which I know is very strong with you, and I'm going to have you say it because you say it much better than I do, is what this episode meant to me the most. He was able to tell us a story in 15 minutes time about what happened to change Saru's life forever. It answered questions about why Saru is the only Kelpian, and I loved it. I thought it was great. So that's my list, man.
I got to say that quote really has become quite impactful to me. I have a piece coming to StarTrek.com soon about Saru and anxiety. And that one line, that quote, or actually it's 3 lines, I suppose. I saw hope in the stars. It was stronger than fear. And I went towards it. It informs everything you need to know about Saru in 3 sentences. It explains why he's in Starfleet. It explains why he is the way he is and what he works to combat every single day. So couldn't agree more with your list, obviously, because we shared it. But you know what they say, great minds think alike.
That is true. I went towards it. That is the definition of what the hope is in Star Trek. And it was an amazing way to end the best short Trek episode.
Going boldly doesn't mean going without fear. And exactly. I think that tells us a lot and gives us a lot to key in on, perhaps for season 2.
Season 2 is only coming up in a couple weeks. We'll get to that in a minute. Well, actually, that's a great segue.
Long-range scan of planet complete.
I don't know if there's really a lot of long-range scans that we can give when we're relating that to the Escape Artist. But do you have any thoughts about anything that we're going to see in season 2 or more forward with regards to the Escape Artist?
I don't know. I get this sneaking suspicion. Nothing's been announced that we're going to see Harry Mudd again. I get this feeling, man. I don't know what it is in watching this episode. I don't know. I think it's going to be the Harry Mudd and not some sort of, clone or replicant or whatever. But I have a feeling that Rainn Wilson is going to be putting on the epaulets again. And I don't know when. It's just a gut feeling I have. I hope I'm right. I won't be surprised if I'm wrong, because that seems to be the way these things go.
I agree with you. That I want to see something with Harry going forward. Now, like you said, nothing has been announced. And I got to say, when we last saw Harry Mudd in that second episode of Discovery Season 1, one of the things I said here on Discovering Trek was I love the way that they closed the character of Harry Mudd being seen in Star Trek until TOS. And that was with the TOS fanfare music as he was leaving on his ship. I thought that was beautiful. I thought that was the last we were going to see of him. And then we had the announcement that we were going to see him in a short trek. And I'm like, okay, this will be a great way to wrap up finally seeing Harry Mudd. And now I got to say, based on the popularity of what I've seen on social media with this particular short trek, I would not be surprised at all if we see him again in the future. And I, for one, really want to see him. Well, Bill, here we are. I got to tell you, man, this is something that I have been waiting for since we last saw Discovery, when the Enterprise was there nose to nose with her at the end of Season 1. Next time we sit down in front of our microphones here on Discovering Trek, Season 2 will be here, and we are going to be ready to talk about it each and every week, man.
That's right, Dan. In less than 2 weeks, it's the return of weekly episode discussion on Discovering Trek, the premier Star Trek Discovery podcast. Disco sophomore season kicks off with episode 1, Brother. And as Christopher Pike suggests, we will be bold, be brave, and be courageous in our discussion of the season premiere. Joining us to examine the episode will be our friend Shashank Avaru from Politrex on the Tricorder Transmissions network of podcasts. We're going to look at what the episode has to teach us about humanity today, make some predictions, some of which we hope may be right someday. And of course, don't forget those episode recaps. They are the thing of legend, or so I'm told. Until then, of course, remember that you can subscribe to Discovering Trek by searching for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or by heading on over to discoveringtrek.com. Dan.
Thanks, Bill. Well, folks, that is it for now. I want to take a special moment here to thank the entire cast and crew of Star Trek Discovery for filling the void these last few months with short treks. We as fans always long for more Trek, and these 4 episodes made the wait for Season 2 just a little easier to bear. We love what you do, and we look forward to what you have in store for us in Season 2. And we also want to thank you, our listeners, for taking your time out of your busy schedule to listen to us talk Star Trek Discovery. As Bill said, we'll be back in just a couple of weeks to kick off our Season 2 discussions, and we cannot wait. Until then, here are some words of wisdom from Hardcourt Fenton Mudd. Human beings do not survive on bread alone, but on the nourishments of liberty. For what indeed is a man without freedom? Naught but a mechanism, trapped in the cogwheels of eternity. And until next time, never stop discovering.
Music for Discovering Trek is provided by 5 Year Mission. They're writing one song for each episode of the original Star Trek. Download their music at 5yearmission.net. Discovering Trek, a Star Trek Discovery companion, is a production of Trek Geeks. Executive producer Dan Davidson. For even more Star Trek discussion, check out the Trek Geeks podcast, available on Apple Podcasts and TrekGeeks.com.